books that pertain to horses and horseback. So it's a great pleasure to have Barry here. And there you go, Mike. Appreciate it.
Well, he reminded me of a story. The first time I went to the book loft, I was with my previous wife, Cheryl, and we lived out at Clark's Creek, which was out of Elgin, and built a little log cabin and didn't own a rig. And so we somehow managed to get a ride to Enterprise and got into the book loft there, and I really didn't have any money. I mean, this book that I had to have cost $15, and Cheryl was like, "You gotta be kidding me." I mean, that was a lot for us. I mean, we were just living off the land and riding horses and, getting by. And this book was written, it was called Think Harmony with Horses, and Ray Hunt. It was my first introduction to Ray Hunt and this whole spiel with natural horsemanship and all that. And I saw the book, I opened it up, and I was like, I gotta have this book. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that was kind of started my journey on horsemanship. And then I got to meet Ray and Tom Dorrance, and Jim Dorrance was living in Imnaha, so I got to spend a lot of time with him and kind of glean some of his knowledge. He was older and crippled up, which was great. So I had a captive audience, and I could ask him questions and bring him out to my corral and, "What do you think of this horse?" And da-da-da-da, and "What do you think? I'm having this problem." And Jim was very wise, and it was such a blessing and Tom and Ray and Bill Dorrance would come and visit Jim because he couldn't go anywhere. And we would pack him up and take him to a Ray Hunt clinic. We got a few of them started here in Enterprise, and so it just kind of snowballed. That was kind of the start of this whole involvement of mine with saddle making and the cowboy culture, and what a blessing to be inspired by some of the greatest horsemen in the world. And I always tell people, I say, just be really careful who you pick for your mentors, because there's a lot of BS out there, and there's a lot of influences that aren't right, and you have to have the discernment to be able to filter through that. And nowadays with internet and everything, that's really true. So people are so exposed to. But to be able to go, that's the path I want. And now we have an outfitting business. I'm jumping ahead, but and I attract young people that want to learn skills, and I have several of them around all the time, and they're just hungry for this knowledge that was shared to me about horsemanship and living off the land and cattle and being in the wilderness and all those things. So I was thinking my evolution, I would just talk about how I got into saddles and all that. And Ray Hunt was a big influence on the saddles that I built and all that. But it started, I was just, like I said, we were just kind of just making a living off the land. Lived in a teepee for several years and built a log cabin, and that was good. I liked it and appreciated that lifestyle and everything, and slowly evolved into more of a ranching lifestyle over time. But buckskin was always a passion of mine, and so that was kind of where I got kind of started on my career with leather work, was making buckskin items. And I made these moccasin this winter, and then made a pair for my wife here, and she beaded them and put the beaver hide on. But I still so appreciate making Indian tan, smoke tan buckskin, and this was a jacket that I tanned the buckskins, and she sewed it together. This takes 3 buck hides to make this jacket properly, because you don't want to use the thin parts of the hide. So these are 3 really nice, fully mature 4-point bucks. And back in the day, in the 80s, late 70s, there was a lot of bucks around. And so it was pretty easy to harvest, good quality hides like this. But now they're, it's a different deal. They're a lot more scarce than they were, thanks to, management and all that. But in any case, I was thinking about my, start in leatherwork and everything, and I saw this hanging in the deal. I don't use it much anymore. It's like an heirloom kind of, it's beautiful, and so kind of a treasured thing that, and it was probably made in the late 70s, early 80s, something like that. So over time, I started in, deeper into my horsemanship career, and that led me to rawhide braiding. I've got a few examples up there with the display, and here's a little bozalita I made, and I don't have too much. A lot of it I'm still using, so I leave it at home, or it's in, my trailer tack room or something, but I just dropped off a few pieces. And then I kind of slowly worked from rawhide into saddle making, and that's kind of what I was thinking this talk would be about. But I thought, well, how do you get there? What's the evolution of building saddles and all that? So that got me thinking about all this other, and just making things. And like I say, most of my life, I've never really had an excess of money, just because of the lifestyle. Work hard for a living, and so we're pretty frugal even now, and so if we can make things, I would prefer to do that, because you buy good quality, crafts or whatnot, and they're very expensive. And I always feel like I'm not really getting enough compensation for my work, but I love it, and so I sell a few saddles. In the wintertime, I'll make a few extra saddles and sell. We made like 6 or 7 last year in the winter. And I'm supplying a lot of the cowboys in Imnaha with saddles. We went to a branding last year, and there was like 8 or 9 of the cowboys were riding my saddles. I thought, dang, I'm starting to get a collection. That's pretty cool. It was made a neat picture. I probably have it on my phone somewhere, but in any case, this was it wasn't the first saddle I made, but we lived at Doug Bar on the Snake River for 3 years, taking care of cattle, and they talked me into putting up hay one summer. And they said, yeah, it'll be fun, you just go down there and change a little irrigation. I thought, oh, that sounds cool. And then you have time. I brought some colts down there. I thought, yeah, I'll ride colts and just have a grand time. Well, it was 115 degrees every day. That was in 85 all summer long. And we lived, fortunately, and there was a cement house there, cement block, and it would stay cool till about mid-afternoon. I was like, I gotta get out of here. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. But I stuck it out and changed pipe and fought rattlesnakes, and it was, but I got that saddle out of the deal, because you'd hold up, after you got done with your work and it'd get that hot, I'd go in I set up a little shop, and I still look at that saddle and I think, how in the hell did I make that with what little I knew? And a little Bruce Grant book on rawhide braiding. He had one little section in the back on saddle making, and just had some rough sketches. And I look at that and go, that's about the only thing I had to go on other than looking at. And I still because now I've got DVDs and books and know a lot of saddle makers, and but at the time, no internet, no nothing. There was going to town to ask somebody anything. There's no phone, and epic journey on this old 47 pickup that we had. It was an all day, like, we might break down, we probably will break down, and hopefully we'll get home at some point. And it's like, yeah, but in any case, I did make this saddle, and one of my Wranglers just loves it. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, that's a piece of junk. And he says, I love that saddle. I finally built him a new one just recently. And so now I get the old saddle, the old relic back. And I can just tuck it away for whatever. Yeah. But then, I still braid rawhide. I love doing that, but saddle making seems to be the most effective way for me to make a little extra money in the wintertime. And we have an outfitting business, and so that's our main business is outfitting, and we run some cows too, and sometimes they make a little money and sometimes they don't. But at least I can get a few rawhides out of the one that die, and well, Cindy asked me to do this talk, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I have no idea. But I started thinking about, the evolution of it, and I thought, well, maybe that'd be interesting. And I've done a lot of public speaking with horsemanship clinics, and I always found that super easy because the horse is doing something and the person's doing something, and it's just like you just talk about what's going on and give them a little direction. And so that was always super easy. But to just sit here in front of a bunch of people that, it's like, okay, what are you going to drum up? And so I don't know, if there's any questions or anything, feel free. And
where'd you get the tree? Did you make the tree too?
No, I thought about making trees. I bought the tree, and I still do. And
Okay.
I buy trees from, he's like phenomenal tree maker. He lives in Idaho, in Star, Idaho. His name is Bill Bean. And his brother is like, his saddles are museum quality. Rick Bean's his name. But Bill makes an awesome tree, and every one of my saddles, the cowboys that use them hard, in canyon country, they've all said they never have a problem. And I say, well, that's the tree. It's the way he shapes them. He makes them out of yellow poplar, which is a light, strong, tough kind of wood, and does it. I should have brought a tree because they're so beautiful, rawhide covered and really fine lacing. Probably uses deer hide for the lacing because buckskin's really tough. And so that's the trees. This came from a different outfit way back then. Like I said, I built that in '85, but now I use those trees from Bill. Yeah.
Do you do custom saddles or just saddles that you sell?
Pretty much custom saddle. I mean, someone tells me what they would like. I kind of stick to a certain theme, the weight tree. We can change like the horn size or the cantle height or whatever, but I kind of stick within certain parameters just because I'm comfortable. And that's, I don't branch out into endurance saddles and all these others that are out there. So it's kind of what I feel works, and so that's what I build. So. Yeah.
Are they still heavy? Have you gone down?
They're fairly stout. I think mine average stripped down, kind of like this one is. This one's got a set of hobbles on it, and if the cinch, but it probably weighs what, 35 pounds, 38 pounds, something like that. They're built to last a lifetime. And I've wore out numerous saddles and just flat wore them out. And when you ride a lot, that's just how it is. I knew this old timer. I rode with him you might have known Larry, Dave Levander. He was an old cowboy that came into this country, and I was working for Will Wild down in Emnaha, and we had the fire in '89, and Will called me up. I wasn't working for him at the time, but he goes, "Oh, can you please go help? Dave's taking care of the cows, and would you run up there and help?" We had to get the cows out of there and move them north to Lord Flat area. And old Dave, a little sawed-off cowboy, probably pushing, I don't know, late 70s. It's hard to tell, you know. And I'd go up there in a pickup truck with him, and every little pothole, he'd be, his back was just killing him. I thought, oh boy, this is going to be great. Cowboying with this dude that can't even take, you know, getting up the road. But he jumped on he had a couple little Mustang horses, and he'd jump on that, and poof, away he'd go. Is that the same guy? I was like, it was so funny. But he was riding this saddle that looked about as wore out as this one, and just paper thin. Right here, they get super thin when you ride them a lot, right, from the leg action. And I asked him about a saddle. It was one of these weights. He said, yes, this was an original cliff weighted tree built, I don't know, back in the 50s maybe. Tom Dorrance and Cliff got together and designed this tree. And I'm not sure who covered it, the leather work, but old Dave told me that that was the third covering on that tree. So they had stripped it down and rebuilt it 3 times, and it was wore out. It needed another covering. I'm going, man, this dude, he rides, I'll tell you what. Yeah, that was something else. But it was cool to see that, wow, those trees can actually last that long and just hold up to, you know that saddle has been rolled on, slammed into, through rivers and rainstorms and all the above, and yet still, just amazing. And that's the way I hope that my saddles are too, that. And I tell people that, I said, you should have this the rest of your life. You know, it might not look real pretty, but I make everything to hold up and double up the leather where it needs doubled up, and I pick the best part of the hides, and I'll pre-stretch those hides so that they won't stretch later, like the stirrup leathers and the rigging and different parts. And yeah, I want those saddles to last a lifetime. And I just have learned as I go and evolved and gotten better and better. And I've spent my life riding in canyon country, and so I know, in the mountains, and so I know what it takes to not soar a horse and what it takes to not soar a person, and, to put the quality and the workmanship and get those suckers to last and hold up. But yet, you look at my string of horses, because I got several of these saddles. I have about 50 head of horses and mules for my outfitting, and we raise colts and stuff. But you rarely see a white spot. You see a lot of outfits where the wither has got, right in that pocket, there's white spots, and that comes from pressure from the saddle. And it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it tells me there's a little bit of pressure there. Over time, it gets to be a hot spot, kind of like a shoe that doesn't quite fit right, and you maybe don't get a real blister, but yet it can get a little hot, And that's kind of how these saddles might fit these horses. And like I say, some of our pack mules, because of different shapes and everything, there'll be a few white marks on those, but we're still pretty careful. Hardly ever get one sore. And the saddle horses, you look at our string of saddle horses, can't even think of one that's got a white mark on it. And that's from the quality of the shape of the tree and how it fits. and, you know, taking care of them too. I'll give my wranglers a little credit there, but I would say it's the design of the tree, the bars and all that. And so I'm happy with that I can work a string of horses all season long, and they do work. When they're doing their thing from about now until mid-November, they're pretty much going, and they're athletes, and they have to work. Then they get the rest of the year off to be horses, and they get turned out on a big ranch, and they love it, and they love their job, and they're happy to do it. When I hear of people talk about beast of burdens, you know, you hear that term a lot. I never think about my stock as being beast of burdens. Like, they enjoy what they do, and we don't never overload them, never overwork them if we can. And, you know, so they get their share of work, but yet they're not drugged down and you know, beat up or anything like that. And I'm proud of that part, that we can have happy stock. And the saddle fit is a big part of that. To make a living on horses and to keep them sound that's a trick, you know.
Barry, probably in the late 70s, early 80s,
Uh-huh.
Bob Masterson was a
Uh-huh.
saddle maker and whatnot here.
Yeah.
And then he and another guy opened a saddle tree factory.
Yes.
And it was down on the golf course road, I think.
Yes, I remember.
And
I knew Bob a little bit.
and do you know what happened? Was that, Larry maybe knows, was that,
I just heard that someone said, oh, there was a tree maker. I thought, oh yeah, maybe Bob Masterson. And it just lasted a few years, and then I don't know what happened.
well,
Yeah.
Bob was the artisan, and he had a fast talker that built the business,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it went away. But Bob was a pretty good craftsman, I
Yeah.
think, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe a
There must be
Masterson saddle was a nice
Masterson
saddle.
up there.
Yeah, there
Oh,
is.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
He
Well,
built
that's
the saddle
neat,
for
yeah.
Grace. He built the, is that right, Cindy?
Grace Bartlett?
He built the saddle for Grace Bartlett.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I've heard-
Family Saddle uses wade trees, or did
Yes,
for years.
Yes.
So you know the quality, but
Yeah.
they would recommend.
for sure. And there was, you know, several different outlets for trees. I asked Bill one time, we were talking, I went to visit him at his ranch in Star, just to get to know him and start a, you know, little bit of a rapport with him. And I said, well, some of these saddle makers, they tell me they can buy a tree for $350. And how do I tell the customer, because my trees cost $900. And he goes, well, they're just pieces of crap. That's how you tell. I thought, well, that's a pretty straight up answer. I guess that. And boy, that guy, he's meticulous. He's got this aluminum box that's got grid lines going every which way, right? And I brought a tree over there that was made in Australia. And I said, well, what do you think of this tree? And da-da-da-da-da. And he sets it in his little box, and with all those grid lines and everything, he goes, well, that candle is a 1/4 inch off. And I was horrified. I looked at that, and he was right. I was like, there was no way you could ever pick up on that if you didn't have that grid right there to look at those lines and everything. And right there, I said, yeah, this is the tree maker for me, because, I mean, if he's that meticulous, and that's what I want, and that's why my horses don't get sore, because of that, you know, that he's so good at that. I just put the leather on, you know.
Talk about your first time riding a horse. How old were you?
Oh, man.
How old were you?
Oh. I don't know first time, because my grandparents had horses and this and that, but I could tell you a real quick story if you wanted to hear it. And once I kind of got into my horse thing, I thought, oh man, I need to go on a walkabout, but a horseabout. All right, I'll ride horses, and I got a pack horse and a saddle horse, and a good saddle horse. just did some trading and bought these things, and I was heading out and went into Idaho, went across the Snake River and up into Idaho and just having a time. And I had this old Appaloosa mare for the pack horse, and she was kind of boring, you know, and I had a good high-stepping saddle horse. And I met this old rancher right in Riggins, Idaho. I was coming down the road thinking, man, I better get some food. I'm getting kind of lean. And so I'm going to ride into Riggins and get some food. And this old cowboy comes up, and Delbert Wicks, and he lived in Riggins. And that country is like this, just if you ever been there. And he run bands of sheep there, but he also had some bands of horses, and some good horses. And I was like, I'd sure like to trade something out for this mare. And he was interested in the mare because it looked perfect for his sheep herders, right, for some of his bands. I said, yeah, what, you know, and so he had this little white mule, and I thought, yeah, that'd be cool, I'd get a white mule. So I take this mule and I go out into the wilderness up the Salmon River for a week or two, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this mule when I get home? Well, meanwhile, I'd seen this colt. He was a 5-year-old, and he hadn't been broke. He was half Arabian, half Cayuse Mustang, and wilder than a March hare, and beautiful. And I kept thinking about that colt, and I was like, and I told him, I said, I can't handle that, you know, I didn't know much. I mean, I was pretty green, and I mean, I was savvy enough to make my way through the wilderness and everything, but this wild horse, you know, it's like, oh, but I got up there and on my own, and I'm thinking about, man, what am I gonna do with a white mule? I can't take anyone for a ride, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, I came back to the ranch and said, hey, Delbert, is there any chance you'd trade this white mule for that colt? And he was interested in that because he'd get a lot more good out of that mule than that wild thing. So I got that horse, and he taught me how to tie up a hind foot. And so we'd tie a big bowline around his neck and then run it around the hind foot and then jack that hind foot up so he couldn't buck. And then I could force my saddle on him, whether he liked it or not. That was before I read Think Harmony with Horses. This was all about just get it done, right? So, and this sucker, he wasn't mean, but he was just freaking wild. And so every time I saddled him or unsaddled him, we had a ritual. I'd tie his hind foot up, and then he'd, okay, and he'd stand there. And so I got that down pat, and so then I took off back for the Snake River, and it's getting late in the year. That'd probably been the late 70s, and he dropped me off. He hauled me a little bit, like up to Whitebird or someplace, and then I rode on over into the Snake River, and I was gonna swim the Snake River and then head back to Oregon. I lived outside of Elgin at the time, had a log cabin there at Clark's Creek, and I was pretty happy I got this colt, and I'm like, man, now I got something. This dude is high-powered horse. And I got to this, well, I started off the breaks there, the ridge, there's some high ridge country there, beautiful, but you start down in the Snake River, and it was a drought year, and there was not a blade of grass in the whole Pittsburgh Landing Basin. The sheep had been in there, and it looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off. There was nothing. And I had come off of the most god-awful, rugged trail. I was like, there's no way I'm going back up. And I saw no way to get out of this basin. And it was like, I can't swim this river. And I was devastated because there was nothing for my horses to eat, and they were hungry, you know. It was time to feed them, and I was starting to feel a little bit depressed, you know, like, ugh. Not that I really get depressed, but I'm like, I pulled a good one. I ain't going back up there, and I can't swim that river. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden these rafts pull up And, I wasn't savvy to what the river scene is, the people raft on the river, but these rafts pull right along on the other side, which is a ways over there, and I'm watching them, and there's probably 25 people, and they all bail out of the raft, and they start setting up a big spread of food on big tables. And I'm looking at that, and finally I got the courage to yell over there, "Hey, is there any chance you could give me a ride?" "Oh, yeah, sure." So they come over, and I was all excited, so I tied up my horse's hind foot and pulled the packs off. And I probably had only been there an hour or so, but it seemed like a lifetime because I just like, what am I going to do? So I got my packs off, and we led that horse. I figured my saddle horse, he's plumb gentle. I figured he'll just follow. And so no problem, right? Well, he wasn't following, no way. It's like he stayed there. And so I took Domingo, that's the name of this wild horse, across the river and then tied him up and to a hackberry tree, and then, damn, now we got to go back and get my other horse. So all I had was a manila lariat rope, a grass rope, and so went back there and caught Sonny and put my loop on him and said, "Come on now, buddy." And he was like having no way. I am not getting in that river. I'm like, come on now. So I put a half hitch on his nose, which is pretty effective, right? It'll put a pinch in there. They'll do something. But me not thinking through this all the way, I got him coaxed in the river, and then you got to get to paddling because this sucker wants to climb in the raft with you, and he's going to drown us all. And so I'm telling him to hurry because here comes Sonny, right? And meanwhile, that grass rope, because I had pulled pretty hard and it got wet, it had cinched down around his nose, and it's a long ways to the other side. And I'm watching in horror, and this horse is, he damn near drowned in the middle of the river. And I'm going, oh. I mean, I'd have been up, then I'd be riding that wild sucker. Yeah. So, but he made it, and boy, I jerked that rope off. He was, how you can imagine. I mean, it's a long ways to paddle across a river and watch your horse slowly drowning right in front of you. That was an eye-opener. So they fed me a great lunch, and I thought, man, this is awesome. And then I tied his hind foot up, and next thing you know, rode off up and but that horse taught me more about horsemanship, and that's probably about the time that fall that we found that book, Think Harmonious Horses, because I was starting some different Mustangs, and this guy was my biggest challenge, and I got to figure this out. And that book helped me so much, and then going and seeing and meeting Ray and seeing how it really works, not just through the philosophy of a book, but actually see it, in real life. And when you talk about this is just this burned-in memory of mine of Domingo. After I rode him around the corral a few times, and I thought, all right, I kind of got a handle on this thing, and I'm riding with a hackamore, which doesn't have a whole lot of effect when you don't know what you're doing, right? So I ride him up this logging road and wind up we lived in Clark's Creek down in a draw, and it's, about a mile up on top of this ridge, and I'm riding him around there thinking everything's great, and then he hears the horses down in the barnyard whinnying. We're still within earshot, and I'm about ready to turn around and go back anyway, but he starts to get in a kind of a hurry, and I was like, oh, this is fun, being young and dumb, you don't really think about what's going to happen next, right? Next thing I know, I'm on a dead runaway, and that was probably one of the fastest horses I've ever owned in my life, and he was flying down that road, and it makes these turns, and the whole time I'm thinking, there's a tree laid across the road that's about right in here, this height. And what's he gonna do when we get to that tree? I'm hoping he'd just hold up, like, oh, hit a corral wall or something, right? No, we went right over that, didn't even break stride at all. And down the mountain, I thought, man, I got this covered. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm cowboying, right? And then we get almost down to right at the bottom, and it takes a sharp left turn. And all I remember is he boom through that turn, and I was hanging on to the saddle and staring at a big red fir tree right there like that at a dead run. And I somehow mustered the strength to pull out away from that tree before it smashed my face in. Yeah. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I kind of created a little bit of that habit in him. I hate to admit it, but it's true. And there'd be times I got him broke, and yeah, I had more adventures with that horse. He was an amazing horse. And I would still say, and I've had a lot of horses, but he's right there at the top of the list of amazing horses that I've owned. But there was times I'd let a friend ride him, and we'd go for a ride, and all I had to do was jump my horse out a little bit, and Domingo was off to the races again, and we'd be on a road, so I knew it was safe. And I remember my one buddy going, I couldn't stop that horse, and I just started counting telephone poles as they were going by. I thought it was grand fun, He probably 3 miles down the road could turn him around, as he got winded. But yeah, when I think of, some of my first horses, you think of the challenging ones, and I've had lots of them, but I learned more, and now life's a lot easier because I kind of understand where they're headed, and I've learned to become proactive, and that's what I tell my students. It's like you need to do something before something happens. You don't wait until you're in trouble and then try to fix it, and then you're mad and blah, blah, blah. It's like, this horse is starting to get a little this way, and we were relating that with cow dogs too. It's like before that dog gets out of sight and just goes wild, you build control in the horse or the dog or whatever before it gets out of hand. And that's so important. And I know grandparents use that because they've had lots of grandkids, right, and their own kids, and so they figured out how to, whereas a new parent, it's like, I don't know what, I got one of my wranglers has got a 3-year-old kid, and it's like, yeah, you just have a few more, and you'll figure it out. We hope anyway. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, is there any more questions there? Yes, ma'am.
When did you get into the outfitting packing business, and how did you find that in terms of?
I had friends that were doing that, and I was trying to make a living off of a herd of cows in Imnaha, and the price of cattle, like in the 90s or whatnot, was so pathetic that I felt like I'm just donating my labor for this herd, in hopes that someday they'll be worth something. And they do go up and down and whatnot. But, and then I started buddying up with some outfitters, and pretty soon I figured out, oh man, I can make a lot more. I can make as much money in a couple months there as I'm working all year for these cows over here. But like I say, the price was pretty bad in the 90s when we were down in Imnaha, and then it got better, and, so I like the cow business, but there's times that so outfitting, people always want to go in vacation, they always want to go hunting. The hunters are really where it's at. They'll pay you good money because they just got to go, So it just slowly evolved. I had a lot of stock, and I had truck and trailers, and so it was pretty easy transition. And I spent most of my younger days packing in the mountains, so I was very familiar with all the above. And that was one thing when I started cowboying, a guy, Will Wild, hired me in Imnaha. Well, shoot, I had my own tough mountain string of ponies, and my job was to get cows out of all these canyons where they had dropped off into the head of Lightning Creek and Cow Creek and Horse Creek and Snake River and all that country, and so that was right up my alley. I could camp out there, and I had good saddle horses, and someone else might have been like, well, this is crazy, because a lot of times you have to just tie your horse up and run down a foot and pick up a little group of cows and dig them back up out of there because it's so steep, that canyon country. So it was a lot of fun.
Barry, what was the wild horse chapter of your life when you were getting the wild horses in training?
Well, that probably Domingo was one of the first, and then
Didn't you bring back?
I did get kind of involved with some different Mustangs.
Yeah.
I had a neighbor there when I lived there out of Clarks Creek, and he ran a band of horses. His name was Linnell Tucker, another little old bitty cowboy, and probably in his 80s, and didn't do anything with these horses. And they were right next door up on a high ridge, and so once in a while I had a corral set up down the canyons. I'd get a couple friends and we'd go up there and run them horses into my corrals and cut out. I usually cut out like a 3 or 4 year old stallion and then turn the rest loose. And then that was my project, and work. So I kind of got my experience with them, and then some of the BLM Mustangs, and and then got involved with the Spanish Mustangs, a little bit different, and now I've got a mix of Spanish Mustangs and Lusitanos and a little bit of quarter horse, all kind of mixed together. I've got a really nice stallion, and it's a combination of those, and a good canyon mountain horse, but with a good disposition and good cow sense, and kind of all the things I'm looking for in an all-around horse. So that's kind of where it's evolved to. So I've kind of created kind of the breed that I was kind of wanting or looking for. Yeah. So I've got one baby offspring inside the trailer right out here. I was going to get these mares, take them to the vets and get them preg tested. And this colt out here, it's out of Ujuana. Carolyn used to own Ujuana. And my stud, and it's a beautiful, beautiful colt.
What's the stud? What breed is the stud?
The stud is part quarter horse, part Spanish Mustang, and then a good portion Lusitano. So the three. So pretty much I've always gravitated to the Spanish style of horses, but I appreciate the other breeds too. Like the quarter horse, and in the Mustang for its toughness.
So get hooked into Lusitanos. They're local.
I know. And then that woman, Bertie, over in Troy, outside of Troy, up the other side, she had a big herd of them, and I mean, she had like a couple hundred, I think. Because Carolyn Eric got involved with it too at one time. But a friend told me about him, and I went there and met this woman and looked over the horses. I was interested, and they were all kind of a lot of feral horse. I mean, a lot of them were imported from Europe and different places and very well bred, but just kind of turned out on a ranch. She had a pen of 90 stallions. Young stallions at one time. And can you imagine? And they were getting out, raising havoc, and it was a mess. And I showed up, and I was interested in buying some horses from her, and then I found out the price tag on them, and I was like, well, that's way out of my league, so I guess we'll forget that. And then later, there was a ranch dispersal, and yeah, it kind of just all fell
Is
apart.
that the guy that got killed there at Wade Point?
Yes, that was a trainer of hers that she had brought in from France, if I got my story right. Germany? Yeah, and he went with her zinging around the corner there.
What's her name?
Around a motor. Her name was Birdie, but I don't know her.
Gray horses, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
A whole lot of.
So in the ranch dispersal and sales and everything, and through friends and everything, I ended up with quite a few. They needed help. They needed to sell horses and whatnot, and I was interested in them. And so I started taking them and using them, and then also crossing them. And they're pretty hot type horses.
Big, I mean, they're stout, aren't they? Like
Some are
blood.
pretty big and some aren't quite as big, but they're all goers, you know, and so I love that. And I kind of toned it down a little bit with the Mustang and the quarter horse, and ended up with this stallion I have is wonderful. He's 4 years old, and I could jump on him right now after he's been breeding mares and go rope a cow on him, and he's ready to go to work. He's got that disposition, and I don't have to worry about him bucking me off or anything. But he can go up in the mountains, and all them colts out of him have the Mustang trait of a really good cupped foot, so they don't walk on their sole. If you know anything about horses, like a mule has a really good cupped foot, and that's why they don't get tender very quick. And a lot of horses, you have a real flat foot, and they're always getting bruised or whatnot because they're kind of hitting rocks. Whereas these horses, they just naturally have more cup to their foot, and so they're very well adapted to canyons and rocky terrain. So it's getting that toughness, but also getting the gentleness and the willingness and the go to, so it's fun to ride these horses because they want to go and want to please. And so it's been a fun journey to just evolve horsemanship wise and stock wise. And I used to have a lot of Spanish Mustangs. It's just what I kind of ended up with and whatnot. And a lot of them were pretty feral. And the good ones were really good, and the ones that were genetically more feral, they were tough, and tough to train and buck you off. And I have to say that I would attribute them to a lot of the knowledge and experience that I've gained because of that. Because if I was just riding, say, your average quarter horse or whatnot, there's a lot I would have missed out on in experience. I feel like that. In the Lusitano too, I always thought if you really want to become a good horseman, you really should ride some of these horses because they have buttons genetically built into them that other breeds don't have. And you touch, you work, and these horses will respond, and you go, whoa, I don't even know how I brought that out in this horse, but they have been bred for hundreds of years by the Spanish and the Portuguese, and it's pretty amazing what is inside those horses and what you can bring out through training and whatnot that you don't see it in other breeds. It's kind of, yeah, it's fun. Like I say, it's all helped me evolve as a horseman, and that is really my passion in life is working with horses. I mean, I guess that's why I build saddles and braid rawhide and everything else. It's all about getting along with horses. Yeah.
It's not your wife?
I try. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, Shirley builds saddles too.
She helps, yeah, yeah.
Is that something she's always done, or?
No, but she's always had a passion for working with leather and did a little tooling and whatnot. So she would, she helps with a lot of the tasks. There's a lot of things that, it's like, whew, there's just a lot of things that go into building a saddle. And so she's really helpful at that. And she's gotten really good at the tooling part, that I will stamp saddles, like that one up there is just stamped, you know. But she's taken the carving to another level, and I keep pushing her, like, come on now, you da-da-da-da-da. You know, I'm pretty particular, and it's like, that isn't gonna fly on this saddle, you know, so we better start over, and that kind of thing, you know. So it's like, well, you better step up your game if you're making one of these saddles. And she has, and she's gotten really good at the tooling, which is fun. And yeah, so, yeah, she's a big part of it. I made this last saddle after she left for Alaska, and I was like, oh my God, this is a lot of work by yourself. So I'm thankful for her helper, for sure. I think about some of these other old timers that just make saddles by themselves in a shop. Oh, I don't know. That's a lot of work. Yeah.
Don't be rawhide reins, I mean, you do beautiful work.
Oh, I don't consider these really fancy. They're just kind of working reins, and I have made fancier and whatnot. But this headstall was made by Slim Bronson,
Yeah.
and do we have some Slim
Yeah.
stuff? Oh,
All
cool.
his spoon
Yeah, yeah.
buckles.
Yeah, he taught me quite a bit about saddle. He was a saddle maker too. And he taught me how to do silver work. So I've got some, I don't guess I have any here, but I've got several bridles that I've made, the conchos, the spoons, and the buckles and all that. And yeah, he was a big influence on me for a while.
Don Mallory went the spoon,
Uh-huh.
Joe's and buckles, and he's got one up there. too.
Nice, yeah.
Because the spoons are fun, and he used
Yeah.
fork tines,
Yep.
buckles.
Yep, yep,
He
yeah.
told a story his son was telling me, and just gathering
Huh.
all this information, Cindy didn't
Yeah.
know about it, but my
Huh.
gosh, what you learn about locally made, how creative.
No
people-
kidding, yeah, it's so fun to see the different craftsmen and whatnot, and, yeah, this is a old Les Vogt, we call it a half-breed bit, and it was missing the cover plate here, or it was funky or something, I don't know, so I made this concho here to cover the joint, you know, where the bar meets the cheek piece.
Do you do other silver work?
A little bit, yeah. Once in a while, I'll hit a lick because I want to make some headstalls and whatnot, and I'll make some conchos, but I don't do it very often. Just once in a while if I get in the right mode. And same with the rawhide. I mostly now concentrate on saddles because that's kind of and I have, you know, several orders, and so that kind of keeps pushing me to make saddles. So. Yeah, then keeps me out of trouble. So
So,
Well.
Barry, it's 1 o'clock now.
okay,
If some people have to go, they can. And also, before you go, though, you should go upstairs and look at the saddles and the saddle work up there.
yeah,
And
I
then
haven't
you
even
can ask
seen
Barry
it.
or Cindy or Shar any questions
Yeah.
about the work and that. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you, please. I muddled through it.